Hey guys, what's happening? So, as expected, Sargon of Akkad has made a video about this whole Charlottesville thing, Antifa, the alt-right, and all that wonderful stuff. And, as expected, it's fucking horrific. Now, it's 30 minutes long, and the majority of it isn't even really making points. It's just, I'm going to say this a lot in this video, it's pure spectacle, honestly. But it's for that very reason I just felt I had to call it out and just do this. So let's have some fun. I'm going to be shaving it down a little bit, obviously, because, I'm not going to sit for a fucking 30-minute video and just like, nah, we're not doing that. But yeah, we'll get through the main points of the video and have some fun. Now, at first, when he's kind of setting everything up, there is just so much I want to say that I will be watching it as we go along, but then later on, we'll kind of like just take a step back and talk about the actual points themselves rather than kind of watching it as we go, if that makes sense. But yeah, so we'll just have some fun and watch the video, and yeah, that's about it. Go.
There's recently been a great media furor over Donald Trump's response to the Charlottesville violence, where the alt-right and Antifa and various other leftist groups had violent physical conflict, and someone ended up getting killed in a car ramming.
Okay, now I'm stopping the video already, but very quickly, Antifa weren't really involved in the Charlottesville thing. It was more like DSA, IWW, I think. Yeah, and general kind of like leftist organizations. It's a minor thing, but I've just seen this a lot thrown around, and no, surprisingly, Antifa didn't really have a huge role. I don't think Black Bloc were there at all at the Charlottesville thing, but whatever.
Donald Trump was absolutely correct to say that this violence was being done on many sides, because it is.
I mean, yes, he's right to say many sides, that there was violence coming from both sides, but you seem to be implying that that alone is condemning, but honestly, the way I see it, it was justified violence. There's a difference between justified violence for people who actually deserve violence to be taken upon them and not. So in this case, obviously, I'd see it as the actual literal Nazis who were like demonstrating and trying to kind of, show their dominance and intimidate and all that stuff. It was justified to break that demonstration with violence if necessary. And then the other side did not have a right to violence at all because they were fucking Nazis. It's quite simple, really. We're not doing the whole like equal playing field here. We're just not. It's okay for one side to use violence. It's not for the other side, because one of those sides are literal Nazis. It's that simple. I don't know why this has to be said, but I will say that it is still very much the exception, right? I don't always say, if these were just, I know regular conservatives don't really protest, but let's say they were, or maybe this was on like abortion rights or something. That's completely different, Yeah, that's a regular conservative protest. That doesn't deserve violence to be broken up. That deserves, like, I'd say, counter-protest, kind of picketing and stuff and laughing at them, because why the fuck are you anti-abortion? But it doesn't deserve to actually crush that organization, because it's not a threat to the, to liberal democracy kind of thing, But again, yeah, there was violence from many sides, but, or both sides rather, but only one of those sides actually had justified use of that violence. It's that simple.
However, the media seem to have been afflicted by a temporary lapse in memory, so I'm going to remind them very briefly now exactly what he's talking about. This is Antifa, and Antifa can broadly be termed communists.
This is just fucking ridiculous. Okay, he literally, I can't get my head over this. This goes on for like, how long does this go on? This literally goes on for a solid minute of just like riot porn of fucking to Hell March from the first Command & Conquer Red Alert game. Like, what the fuck? Like, what the hell is this? I don't understand what. And then I love before he starts it, he reminds you that they're communists, as if that's meant to like fucking scare you, as if we're living in the fucking Cold War or some shit. Just feel like that sometimes, but I just like this is pure spectacle. This means nothing. There is no argument here. This is just, look at these spooky, scary Antifa smashing up things and being violent and like, it's just, he doesn't point to any specific examples. He doesn't actually say anything. He's just like, here's some footage to make you scared about what I'm talking about. That's all this is, and it's pathetic, really.
The left-wing journalists, who invariably identify as a form of socialist, are naturally remarkably sympathetic to communists.
The left-wing journalists that identify as socialists, can you point those out to me? Can you name them for me, please? I'd love to meet these people, because they don't exist, Sargon. The mainstream media are not socialists as much as you and I both want them to be, but albeit for very different reasons.
But anyway, let's have a look at the footage that they are referring to, and Donald Trump is referring to there. I guess it's kind of hard to tell, but I think it's indicative that Antifa had placed themselves directly in the path of the permitted march that would possibly sway my opinion as to who is in the right and who is in the wrong here.
Side note here, can we just talk about how many people are throwing up this point that it was a permitted march and that made it okay? This is like the highest level of bootlicking you can possibly go to. It's like, oh, well, if the fucking government says it's okay, well, then it's okay. I mean, surely how do rational skeptics fall for this? I don't get it. How are you guys, like, I'll actually give you guys credit that occasionally you can be so on point with, like, maybe we shouldn't trust this, maybe this is biased, blah, blah, blah. But just at all the wrong times. I don't get it. And then the second it comes down to something like this, the second it comes down to either sympathizing with Nazis or hating on communists, you will just accept anything that is given to you that confirms your biases. I don't get it. But my point is, I don't give a fuck if it's a permitted protest, and nobody should. It really doesn't, like, nah.
And now the left is unironically still grappling with the moral conundrum of, do you punch someone just because they think differently to you? And the overwhelming consensus from the socialist left appears to be, of course you do, because that person must be a Nazi.
That was never a conundrum we were grappling with. It's never something we even discussed. No, don't punch people because they think differently to you. Punch people because they're Nazis. It's that simple, and we never grappled with that either. In fact, we were from the very start. In fact, for the last 100 years, we were like, yeah, no, do that. Why do we even have to discuss this? This is, like, there's no argument here among the left. We all very much agree. Punch Nazis. But people just regularly disagree with us. Everybody else but literal fascists. Yeah, we're not going to punch them because we disagree with them. Of course not. That's ridiculous. But people always paint it how that is. No matter how many times you add the nuance and say, no, it's only Nazis. Every single time. Oh, so you punch everybody you disagree with? It's like, you can't win with these people.
At least in the case of Richard Spencer, you are closer than most. But most Antifa violence is not done to Nazis. It is done to people who have no particular interest in politics, or at least are not out demonstrating at the time.
And once again, you don't actually give any examples or sources of this to prove this point. This is probably one of the biggest self-fulfilling prophecies that I've ever seen. That Antifa just go around misidentifying fascists all the time and then beat them up because they think they're fascists, but really they're not. It's such a meme, and people have just been saying it so much that it just made itself true magically overnight because everyone just says it is, therefore that's how it is. But the thing is, I've actually asked people, okay, so what are some actual examples besides Milo? Because Milo is the only real example I can see of people saying they were attacking Milo for being a fascist, yet he wasn't. Thing is, though, they weren't actually trying to stop him from giving that talk because they were calling him a fascist. They were trying to stop him from giving that talk because he fully intended to release names of students at that campus who were like, I think it like they shouldn't have been there or something. I forget the details. Nonetheless, it had literally nothing to do with fascism whatsoever. It was just students trying to defend their students from being kicked off the uni. Whether you want to argue it was justified the students were there to begin with is a completely other thing, but you see how this is unrelated to Antifa misidentifying Nazis, right? Because I've never actually seen it happen. I've seen people say, oh, well, they attacked these reporters or something, and they're not attacking them because they're Nazis, though. They never claimed that they were Nazis. If people who claim to be Antifa are attacking people fully aware that they're not Nazis, I would condemn that. Okay, but I can't help that. I can't help Antifa's action. People going out and then attacking people who they know aren't Nazis, okay, but attacking them anyway, doesn't change the fact that we should attack literal Nazis. They're completely separate things. I condemn one, I don't condemn the other, and just because one happens doesn't mean the other doesn't have to happen. Again, it's a complete self-fulfilling prophecy that Antifa just label anyone that they disagree with Nazis. It's again, it's this kind of hyperbole that's been kind of drawn up by the right and the reactionaries and the liberals, that, you know, if you just punch Nazis for being Nazis, that means you punch everybody that you disagree with, and then you'll use the excuse that they're Nazis to attack them and shut them down. But again, I never see this happen.
My problem with this is that it implies there is not a moral equivalence between Nazis and communists, and there is.
Why though? Why the hell is there a moral equivalency between Nazis and communists? Communists who want to change the mode of production of society to a use-based one rather than a profit-based one, okay, who want to help people, who want to help everybody, okay, versus people who literally want genocide. You can say in some weird sense that they both lead to the exact same totalitarian genocidal states or whatever the fuck, but the difference is, okay, this is intentional for Nazis, it is not intentional for communists. If somebody says they're a communist, that does not mean that they intentionally want a totalitarian state that is going to kill people. If they say they are a Nazi, that does mean they inherently want this, because Hitler is an example of successful fascism, okay? So when you say that they are morally equivalent, you are completely ignoring any kind of intent that these people have, what they actually want to do to society. You're just saying because they both use violence, they're inherently wrong. But when we take that back, even liberal democracy shouldn't exist, because how do you think feudalism was overthrown? You think the kings and the monarchy just casually gave up all their power? No, fuck no. There had to be violent revolution to overthrow them with political violence. Okay, but this violence, as you would agree, was justified. However, if you were living back then, Sargon, I do get the feeling that you'd say the monarchists and the liberals are morally equivalent because they both use violence or some bullshit like that. I don't know, but it just really pisses me off.
They are both collectivist groups who demonize an outgroup. In the case of the neo-Nazis, it's people who are not members of the white race. In the case of communists, it is people who are not members of the proletariat.
Oh, this is such bullshit logic. This is the same kind of thinking that lets people believe that cultural Marxism is a thing. You know, it's this idea that any kind of conflict theory are like related, or any kind of conflict theory in the case of cultural Marxism is Marxism. Like, you know, when people say, oh, well, you know, cultural Marxism is just like replacing the capitalist and the worker with like the fucking male and female or whatever. And it's like, because they're both conflict theories, that means they're both Marxism, or they're both related somehow, they're both similar. But no, conflict theories have existed long before Marxism, and conflict theories that are radically different from each other exist. Like, this is ridiculous. This is absolutely ridiculous to say that because they both have a quote-unquote out-group, but talking about Marxism as having the bourgeoisie as an out-group is just, it really is horrifically simplifies things. I mean, for a start, Marxists would actually take on the bourgeoisie if they were to aid revolution, which has historically happened, but you don't obviously get the same with white nationalists. They don't take on black people who want to help them lynch other black people. They just lynch all the black people. Like, so it's like, you know, for a start, that's not even the same. But again, you're just to say that both things are a conflict theory doesn't actually prove anything.
I mean, let's compare their actions, shall we? Let's have a look at the things that both of these groups do and see if we can't identify any commonalities. So some neo-Nazi has been arrested for smashing the glass at the Holocaust Memorial in Boston. And like I showed in the Antifa footage earlier, this is leftists pulling down a Confederate statue in Durham. Neither of these groups are particularly concerned with property rights. Both the Nazis and communists are what you could term as some variant of socialist, which is incidentally directly opposed to the English liberalism of the Enlightenment that was the direct inspiration for the Founding Fathers.
I've I've tried to start a sentence 3 times now, and I just can't. Oh, okay. This is again, okay, confusing the fact that violence existing at all is inherently bad, okay? You have literally compared taking down a statue commemorating a literal, like, someone who wanted to keep slavery going to a Holocaust memorial. I really... How are you this dumb? I don't get it. No, hey, that's mean. You're not this dumb. You're just incredibly good at manipulating dumb people, clearly. And then again, Nazis are a form of socialist. Like, what the fucking fuck? Do I even need to bother with that one? I don't think I do. It's just, he's gone a step further than both sides are bad. He's now saying, actually, both sides are literally the exact same. They're both socialists. They're both collectivists. They both think the same. They're basically the same, but they're still fighting each other and they're still diametrically opposed. It's fucking the mental gymnastics at here. That is the word I'm looking for. Mental fucking gymnastics. Never has that word applied more than right now, because holy shit. It's just fucking ridiculous. It really is.
Here is one group of racial collectivists chanting Black Lives Matter, and here is another group of racial collectivists chanting White Lives Matter.
Oh look! 2 groups in a protest are chanting things. They're the exact same! And it's not like the second group was chanting White Lives Matter as a direct response to Black Lives Matter, right? That's what that is. They didn't just happen to randomly come up with both these phrases independently. They're clearly reactions. One's a clearly reaction to the other.
The only difference produced by this cacophony of racialized collectivism is the side that they're advocating for.
Yeah, this is like the argument that if you condemn white power, you have to condemn black power, without actually looking into the nuance of what actually both of these groups do and think. And it's like, because black power don't believe that we should rid society of white people, besides what you cultural Marxist conspiracy theory nutcases think. And they don't think that all white people are the same either. In fact, black power has historically targeted the system of racial oppression rather than the actual people themselves. I'm not saying there are exceptions. I'm not saying black supremacy isn't bad, because of course it's bad, but to say that they're the same thing is ridiculous. It just completely ignores history. It completely ignores what historically it has been. And the thing is, I agree that identity politics is bad, but here's the thing. White power uses the methods of identity politics by saying all black people are the same. By saying it's black people as an identity that are the problem. Okay? Black power actually, well, maybe to a certain degree it does, but mostly not nearly in the same way and not nearly to the same extent as white power. To the degree where they're just not the same thing. It's not the same thing. We're just summing in different groups because they don't use the same methods. They don't think the same way about other identities. They don't think the same way about their own identity. Because, class collaboration is a big part of it as well. White power are like very much, if you're rich or poor, it doesn't matter. If you're white, then you're white, and that's great. But people who have been in black power, if there's a black CEO, they're going to have a problem with that. Because, again, they target the actual system itself. Not saying all black power is inherently anti-capitalist, but historically it largely has been. And to target actual systems and actual economics, well, that's not identity politics in the slightest. That's what we should be doing. And that's usually what the left tends to do. Black Lives Matter itself leaves something to be desired when you compare it to, say, the Black Panthers or something. But again, they're just not the same. They're just really not the same. And to actually frame them like they are is just incredibly disingenuous. That's all it is. It's, again, trying to almost trick your viewers before they even have a time to think about what's being said, just to get them mad and make them feel as an enlightened, rational, skeptic centrist. That's all it is. Okay, now basically for the rest of the video, Sargon just shows clip after clip of alt-right leaders explaining why the alt-right is gaining popularity, and this is all to prove his point that the left started it and that this is the left's fault for why the alt-right did stuff, and everything is the left's fault. And if the left just shut up and stopped complaining, then the alt-right wouldn't exist. Okay? That's his main point here, and he does this in the next 20 minutes. He does this.
I want to be really, really clear about this. It is the opinion of the neo-Nazis that the left wing racial identitarians are creating more Nazis.
So what Sargon's doing here is actually quite interesting, because he's using alt-right talking points without directly allying himself with the alt-right. And he only gives one side of the story here on why the alt-right has gained popularity to prove a point that he's already decided is true, in line with how rational he is. He doesn't even stop to consider that maybe the alt-right is slightly biased on this topic, and instead just takes literally everything they say at face value for why the alt-right has gained popularity. Clearly he just hasn't considered, or maybe he has and he just doesn't actually care, that the alt-right want to paint this victim narrative here in order to gain sympathy from liberals like Sargon and his viewers, and Sargon is fully aiding them in achieving this goal here. He doesn't even entertain the idea of showing the left's side of the story on why the alt-right have gained in popularity here. So, Sargon, in case you're wondering, I'll fill you in. Yes, the alt-right are a reaction to the left, but just because something is a reaction to something doesn't mean that the original cause of this is what's to blame here, okay? Hear me out. Take these two examples. Say, is it the wife's fault for being beaten because she burned dinner that night? Or how about a more politically orientated example? Is it the fault of the classical liberals for trying to progress society and lead us to a liberal democracy away from feudalism? For the monarchy, crushing them with violence in order to sustain current society, is it the classical liberals' fault there? No. Because it's the monarchy who are in the wrong here, okay? For trying to preserve feudalism. Even though the classical liberals or whatever started it, that doesn't matter. Because it's the classical liberals who are in the right here. Now, the second example is obviously a lot more important because it highlights that whenever there's progress being done in society, and I do know that you don't consider the left to be progress in society, leading us to a better society, but just for the sake of argument right now, just ignore that for a moment. Whenever there's progress leading us towards a better society, there will always be people who oppose this progress because they stand to benefit from the way that society is right now, even if the new society would benefit more people. Some people may even go further, in the case of fascists, for example, to instate a new society that's even worse than the current society in response to people trying to create a better one. Is it the fault of the original people trying to improve society that some other people then overthrew everything, crushed them with violence, and instated an even worse one? I'd say no. I'd say it's the fault of the goddamn people who made the worst society to begin with and prevented progress. What you should be arguing about here, Sargon, is not whose fault it is or who started it from the safety of your centrist ivory tower, consistently jerking yourself off about how goddamn moral you are. But rather, you should be arguing about which side is going to lead to a better society. Now, I know that you just want society to stand still and retain liberal democracy forever, but unfortunately, that just can't happen. Now allow me to explain. Really, this requires a shift in mindset. So let me set this up. You need to get out of this mindset that there are specific people, specific groups that are complaining, trying to change everything, won't shut up about race, and then in turn this kind of eggs on the alt-right, which causes over time these increased political tensions that we have now and well, the situation is now. Instead of just thinking, if these damn social justice warriors wouldn't just stop talking about race all day, everything would be fine and liberalism would be secure, and start realizing that this is just an inevitability that is going to happen whether you like it or not, because otherwise you're just hoping specific individuals don't do certain things, and then if they don't, that other specific individuals just won't take their place, which of course they will. Now, the example I like to draw on to kind of frame this, and one that I pointed out in my last video, is think of political violence as an earthquake, okay? It causes damage, it's bad, okay? We don't want it to happen. But when it does happen, what you're doing, Sargon, is you're blaming the tectonic plates for shifting that day. You just can't help it. And the reason you can't help it is, and the reason that these, like, quote-unquote earthquakes happen to begin with, is because it's actually liberal democracy that is perpetually creating the conditions that cause people to act like this to begin with. You know, and just examples of this are the 2008 crash and the refugee crisis. And you can talk about how you want to reform capitalism so that these things just don't happen to begin with. And that's all fine and dandy, but it's kind of a useless pursuit when they've already happened. And they've already had that effect on society, which is now led us to the point of political violence that we're at. Regardless of if it was preventable or not with Hayek's vision of capitalism, it's already happened. I'm sorry, but we can't go back in time. And things like this are going to continue to happen, because even if you can prevent some kind of crash in one instance, in fact, you've admitted yourself in that debate we had, crashes are always going to happen, and they are what ultimately lead to these kind of things. Coupled with other political destability that tend to be a result of trying to prevent crashes or trying to recuperate after these crashes have happened. Because political destability under capitalist society really does revolve around this boom and bust cycle. And again, as you've admitted, the boom and bust cycle is an inevitability to capitalism. So no matter what happens, these types of political instabilities and this tension and this political violence is always going to occur. And all you're doing is sitting there and just blaming these specific individuals and just hoping that they didn't do what they've already done. But as we've established, just basing off of logic that you already agree with, it's always going to happen. So instead of just sitting there and hoping people at some point just regain their senses or stop engaging in political violence magically overnight, you have to actually get engaged and take a side here, which you think would be better for society, fascists or anti-fascists. But honestly, I feel like you've already made your choice on that one. And even if we get through this period of instability without liberal democracy being overthrown, neither side gains the momentum they need to actually properly shake the foundations of society, this won't be down to any kind of centrist moral grandstanding that you repeatedly take part in. This will just be down to we eventually get into another boom cycle and people just get happier with their lives again until we hit another bust, and we do this all over again until eventually we do get to one of the points where either one of these sides gains enough momentum to overthrow capitalism. It could be this time, and considering the fact that there's meant to be, and we're not going to get into conspiracies about economic crashes here, but I will say there are a lot of predictions that another economic crash is coming quite soon, 5 to 10 years. Particularly out of China, I think. And if that hit now, as political tension, if political tensions stay this high by the time that economic crash hits, I'm fairly certain that we're going to be seeing some kind of insurrection happening. I'm fairly sure. But maybe it won't. Maybe we'll get to the point where we get another boom cycle again. But again, in fact, it's even worse than you centrists just being completely useless on this. As it stands right now, you guys are actually aiding the alt-right, or at least you specifically here, Sargon, with again aiding them and making them out to be the goddamn victims in this scenario. I just don't get how you can do that. Besides, maybe it's because that's the bias that your viewers are tended towards, and you know that, and you want to keep your fucking subs going up. That's all I can guess. But yeah, I don't know. All I can say is maybe just, at the very least, please just stop taking everything the alt-right says at face value. Just consider their motives. Please. Please. Just, if that's one takeaway from this, that's all I can. It's all. Oh. But anyway, I think that's everything I have to say on this topic. I think we've dealt with the two main videos. I think we dealt with the two main topics of this video. Somehow it was a 30-minute video, and it only had really two main points. There was just pure spectacle to rile up viewers and stuff, because that's all these people seem to do anymore. But yeah, I do hope you guys enjoyed the video. I'm going to try and get this uploaded in like an hour, like maybe 2. And I decided I want to make this video about 2 hours ago. So this would probably be the quickest video I've ever made. So if it's any good, I'll actually be quite proud of myself. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you next time.